Today we're reading from 1 Peter chapter 3, verses 13 to 18. Who's going to harm you if you're eager to do good? But even if you should suffer for what is right, you are blessed. Do not fear their threats, do not be frightened. But in your hearts revere Christ as Lord. Always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you to give the reason for the hope that you have. But do this with gentleness and respect, keeping a clear conscience, so that those who speak maliciously against your good behavior in Christ may be ashamed of their slander. For it's better, if it's God's will, to suffer for doing good than for doing evil. For Christ also suffered once for sins, the righteous for the unrighteous, to bring you to God. He was put to death in the body, but made alive in the spirit. This is the word of the Lord. You may be seated.
I'm excited to share my heart with you today. If I haven't had the chance to meet you, my name is Phil, and I get the honor of being the lead pastor here at the Square. And happy Labor Day. And listen, I just want to tell you, there is special gifts in heaven for people who come to church on holidays. And so I am proud of you. I'm pretty sure it's a hot tub or something like that. So I'm being silly. I want to show you something. If you want to know how my week was, I'm going to share with you how my week was, being the father of 4 children and 2 extremely rambunctious boys. So hold on one second. Siri, what's my name?
You're Philip. But since we're friends, I get to call you fart 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 fart.
My son runs up to me and goes, "Dad, you can't believe it. Ask it your name. Ask it your name." Clearly, I've got to learn some things about teaching my children respect. So, no, I love my boys so much. They are rambunctious and wild and incredible young men, and I love it. We just died laughing. I remember Jake's like, he was literally wheezing, crying, like, "I can't believe that she said it," you know. Don't you as a parent just pray, go, "God, please let this be the level of my son's humor in 8 more years," right? Like, please keep him at this level of innocence that he thinks the word "but" is the funniest thing in the history of mankind. This morning, I just want to take a few minutes and share with you, and I'm actually excited because we get to close our time together by one of my friends and somebody who's part of our church community named Matt Stover, who's going to share a little bit of his story. And over the last few weeks, if you've been with us, you know that we are talking about this issue of doubt, that we recognize that in our culture, so many people are walking through considerable, significant issues of doubt. Some of you in this room have walked through issues of doubt. Some of you in this room are currently walking through issues of doubt. Some of you in this room one day will walk through issues of doubt. And if none of those are true, I can guarantee you this: somebody you deeply love is walking through issues of doubt. And so if we are going to be a church family that communicates the beauty and the love of Jesus in the middle of a culture that is broken by uncertainty, it's important for us as a church family to talk through some of these kinds of things. And this morning, if you either are new with us or you've missed the last few weeks, I would really encourage you to go back and listen to the podcast, because in many ways, what I'm sharing with you this morning is in fact a response to those 2 teachings. And so it's going to make much more sense in light of them. 2 weeks ago, we just talked about what the heart posture of doubt should look like. If we're walking through doubt, what should we do? How do we be faithful to being true and genuine seekers of truth? What does it really look like to walk through doubt the right way? It's what we talked about. And then last week, we talked about how we have to understand that we belong to this greater story and greater culture around us called secularism. And that secularism is the most powerful discipleship force that we've ever seen. And what it's doing is it's slowly, intrinsically coming into our lives and robbing us of our faith. And if we don't realize that we're actually in this culture that is constantly trying to rob us of our deep sense of belief, we won't know how to flourish in the midst of it. That we actually have to understand what it means to be a Christ follower in a secular age. It's a new world that we live in, right? The analogy I used last week is in the biblical story. We're not prophets in Israel anymore. We're prophets in Babylon. To be a Christ follower doesn't look like King David. It looks a lot more like Daniel. And we have to understand what it really means to be followers of Jesus in this age and in this time. And this morning, what I want to talk to you is very simple. And my hope is that it's encouraging for you, is that there are reasons for the hope that we have in Jesus. That as followers of Jesus, we don't follow him based on blind allegiance or naive foolishness. There are actually deep and compelling reasons for the hope that we have. And I want to say this morning, I don't pretend to be the smartest person in the world. I don't pretend to have all of the answers. And listen, I love the way Timothy Keller said this. If God had given us a Loctite argument, the entire world would be Christian. He didn't give us a Loctite argument, but he did give us a Loctite person in Jesus. And there is something so substantial in the person of Jesus that you and I, in the middle of all of our uncertainty, we can actually hang the confidence of our lives on him. And what we can be is a community of people that learn how to walk through deep places of gray and uncertainty and doubt, but we can walk with strength and certainty because Jesus is substantial enough for us to say yes to him. And I want to be fair to you that I'm going to speak to you about the convictions that I carry and about the reasons we have hope. But I want to say this to you. If you're a believer here, I just want to offer these to you as encouragements, but also reasons for you to understand the strength of your own convictions. But if you're here and you're uncertain, you're here and you're a seeker, you're here and you're not sure what's true, you're not sure what you believe, I just offer these to you to wrestle with genuinely. And I would want to tell you that I would love to respond with you. I understand that the paradigm of this conversation is very unfair because I have the microphone and you do not, which is a fun feeling to have. But I understand this. What I'm trying to say is that I might bring some things up that you go, man, I want to talk further about that. Or I'm not sure about that. I just want to tell you my heart's desire is not to force something down your throat, but actually open the door for conversation to know that you are radically loved by God. And if you are seeking who Jesus is, this is a safe place for you to consider him and find him. And I love this passage out of 1 Peter. And I love how it says this, but in your hearts, revere Christ as Lord. Always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you to give the reason for the hope that you have. Listen to that. Be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you to give the reason for the hope that you have. Guys, I want you to know this. There is reason for our hope. There is reason for our hope. There are things for us as followers of Jesus that call us and beckon us to place our faith and our life in him. And I want to share very simply those things with you today. I'm going to move fast. And so I just want to tell you, wherever you would want to talk more, you can just feel free to ask. The first is this, and I think this is very important for us to understand. The secular story isn't about tolerance, it's about allegiance. And it doesn't have the credibility to rob and damage your faith. And this is a big part of what we talked about last week, but I want to reiterate this. The reason so many of us are walking through the things that we're walking through is because without realizing it, we have become secular people. That so many of us are actually more of disciples of secularism than we are of Jesus. And we didn't intend to be. We didn't try to be. It's just the product of living in a culture that's going the opposite way of Jesus. And we've been blind to it for so long. And without knowing it, they've come in and they've deeply affected us and they've deeply called us. And now we're coming in this place where we're so filled with uncertainty and anxiety and depression and shame and doubt. We go, well, what am I supposed to do with my faith and this life that I have with Jesus? And what you need to remember is this, is that that is all attached to a secular story that is lying to you, that is not about tolerance, it's about demanding your allegiance, and it doesn't have the credibility to do that. Right. That when we look and we take a step back at the substance of postmodernity, we realize that even postmodern thinkers are realizing the foolishness of postmodernity that's giving birth to what we're calling critical realism. People in the world are already recognizing postmodernity actually doesn't have any logical ability to build a foundation of life on its foolishness. Postmodern philosophers are already rejecting it in their own midst. It's not something credible enough to make you uncertain about your own life and convictions, right? We understand this, that pluralism is this concept that demands a certain allegiance, but it doesn't have actual credibility or substance or ideology to demand that you wrestle with it in the world in the way that says you should not feel certain about your life in Jesus. That ideas around human secularism actually deny all that we know about human natural law and the realities of the universe, to actually buy into theories of human secularism, I not only have to leave the concepts that I've come to believe in about Jesus, I have to actually leave all the logical understandings that most agnostic evolutionists would hold. That life has intrinsic connection and value and meaning, and there are natural laws bound together that are simply unbreakable. That when we begin to actually undo the patterns of thinking that are trying to demand your allegiance, you realize they don't have the weight to call you. They don't have the authority to tell you you're wrong. They don't actually have the substance that we've given them. And remember, we talked about this last week, how secularism, what secularism produced, and this is not opinion, this is conjecture now of agnostic secular philosophers. They're talking about what has secularism produced in the world. It's produced 5 things: doubt, shame, self-individualism, and consuming. This is the product of secularism. That what people are coming to realize now is that the secular story isn't not only working, it is destroying humanity. I recently read a book that was really interesting by a Jewish atheist philosopher named Zygmunt Bauman. And if you're always going to make your case for Jesus, it's always good to quote some Jewish atheists. But he talks about, his book is called Destroyed Lives. And his whole first chapter is about what secular philosophers are not willing to admit. And he paints the package of the story in the way of like a production line. And he goes, while secular people want to hold for you the value of what they're creating, all of them are ignoring and lying the trail of wasted lives that they have left in their midst. And he goes on to talk about this. He goes, as an atheist, he says this, that what we can no longer deny is that human beings are built for an ache for a creator. Whether you got there because a creator put that in you or evolution thought it was the best possible scenario for you, we cannot deny that every human being flourishes in an ache for transcendence. And when you remove meaning and transcendence from human society, you ruin human society. See, part of what we need to realize is that we are Christ followers in a secular world, and a secular storyline is actually destroying us. And we don't need to give it its allegiance. So much of the things we're facing are because we have to step back and realize, and I just want to even tell you this personally, as I've begun to realize I get to detach my life. I don't have to give my allegiance to the culture around me. I can give my allegiance to a crucified and resurrected King named Jesus. And when I do that, he frees me from all of the bondage of the culture that we live within. There's so much more that could be said, but I want to remind you, we hold up this glamorous thing called secularism. But actually, the truth is it's crumbling around us. It's destroying humanity, and it's simply not working. It's not working. Brene Brown, I love this quote. We're the most depressed, medicated, and obese generation in the history of America. And we got there because we're secular. Second, Christianity stands alone in its trustworthiness and historical witness. I believe this. Christianity stands alone in its trustworthiness and historical witness. Okay, if you can, come back with me to like high school history, okay? This is very simplified. This is on a complex thing. But basically, if you were going to talk to historians, they would tell you that there are 2 things that make a historical document trustworthy or not trustworthy. 2 things, okay? They are simply this. How many ancient copies of a historical document do you have? And what is the time span between when a document was written or when we believe a document was written and the closest example we have of that? So let me give you an example. If I found something that I said, hey, this was something from 3000 BC, but there's only one copy of it, and the copy I have of it is from 1947. It's not very credible. You understand what I'm saying? One copy from 60-ish years ago is not very credible. Right? So you understand what I mean. For a historical document to be trustworthy, it has to have 2 things. It has to have actual closeness in the date that it was written, and it has to have a level of amount that show us that it was credible within the history it was written within. I want to show you this very quickly. I have a chart up here you're not going to be able to read, but I have it up here so you know I'm not lying or making it up. This is from just a kind of academic understanding of the most historically trusted documents in the world. And maybe you've heard this, maybe you haven't. These are the list of the 20 most historically accurate documents. Most of them are Roman histories. We have Lucretius, we have Pliny, we have Plato. Isn't it interesting with Plato? Have you ever been in a world where somebody's gone, you want to know what? Plato didn't actually exist. Plato was a figment of your imagination created by a culture that just wants some sophisticated scholar to tell you it's okay, right? Nobody says that. Everyone's like, yeah, Plato existed. Totally existed. One of the most trustworthy historical figures in history. We have, get this, Plato lived between 427 and 347 BC. We have only seven historical documents of Plato. And the closest one is from 900 AD, 1,200 years between when he believed he wrote what he wrote and what we have from him. So listen, that sounds, but that's trusted. That's like the 14th most trustworthy, 16th, 17th most trustworthy historical documentation in the world. Demosthenes, Herodotus, we go on and on, all these Roman names. And we get to Caesar, right? We all know Caesar. Look, Caesar lived in 100 to 44 BC. You know, the oldest documentation we have of Caesar is from 980, 1,000-year span. And we only have 10 copies. He's like the 9th most historically provable person in history. Livy, Tacitus, Aristotle, Josephus. Then we have Homer. Homer is the second, Homer's Iliad is the second most historically documented substance in the world. And get this, it's pretty significant. He lived in 900 BC, and we have a copy of Homer's Iliad from 400 BC. That's pretty cool when you think about it. 500 years from when we believe it was written to what the copy that we have, and this is how many historical documents we have, 643. That's a lot. Let me tell you about the first most accurate and trusted historical document in the world called the New Testament. Written in the first century, somewhere between 50 AD to 100 AD. We have copies from the second century. Now, they have this papyrus called P52. It's a papyrus of the Gospel of John, which now they accurately date somewhere between 103 to 107 AD. And we believe the Gospel of John was written somewhere between 85 to 95 AD. That means we have a copy of the Gospel of John within basically 20 years of when we believe it was written and the first copy we have of it. And how many of those historical documents do we have? 5,600. 5,600. I mean, look at number three. So Creepy's, and then we have a 1,400-year gap and 193 documents, and then we have the New Testament. Friends, listen, the New Testament makes supernatural claims. I'm not denying that. The supernatural claims of the New Testament are something that we need to wrestle through with faith. I'm not trying to be naive here, but you do need to understand this. The Bible is the most historically accurate, trusted document in the world. And anyone who wants to tell you otherwise is simply building a conspiracy theory that is not willing to look at facts. This is not Christian documentation. This is just simply trusted factual reality. The New Testament is the only trustworthy, reliable religious source in the world. And when you get around people that go, oh, you can't trust the Bible. Oh, come on, the Bible's just a made-up bunch of myths. And you had some monks in the 600 just wanting, they took little aspects of Egyptian theology and they blended it in. The Bible's just some conspiracy theory of New Age mysticism about Rome and demigods. And you're just like, oh, it makes me want to swear. It's so foolish. It makes me angry because it's not willing to look at facts. Again, hear me. I can never detach faith from saying yes to Jesus. But I can with confidence tell you the Bible is not a lie and the Bible is not a joke. It is the most trusted historical document in the world, and it demands something from that. But not only that is this, the life, death, and missing body of Jesus are overwhelmingly undisputed facts in the non-believing academic world. I want you to know that. Nearly all unbelieving academics say this: the life, the death, and the missing body of Jesus are historical facts, as much as we can claim something to be a historical fact. You can't really prove history, but as much as in historical factual theory we're able to come up with arguments, they would say the life, the death, and the missing body of Jesus are about as historically accurate as you can get. The proof of the resurrection is far more significant than you think it is. I love this quote by a leader named Brooke Foss Westcott. Ranking all the historical evidence together, it is not too much to say that there is no historic incident better or more variously supported than the resurrection of Christ. There is a substance in the resurrection that we actually get to hang our hope into. I love this quote by Philip Yancey. I love this quote by Philip Yancey. In many respects, I find the unresurrected Jesus easier to accept. Easier makes him dangerous. Easter makes him dangerous. Because of Easter, I have to listen to his extravagant claims and no longer pick and choose from his saying. Moreover, Easter means that he must be out there on the loose somewhere, right? I love that. A resurrected Jesus changes everything. It changes everything. And actually, when you come back to it, the only logical response for what happened in the first 200 years of Christianity is one of two conclusions. That a group of men got together and said, we are going to manipulate the world over a lie, and we're going to go from a cowering group of men that do not want to suffer to a group of leaders that were all martyred outside of John for the sake of Jesus. That they all martyred and were killed to protect a lie, or something happened that they were absolutely convinced that they had experienced the resurrected Jesus. And then when you look at what happened in the first 200 years of Christianity, growing from a handful of hundreds to nearly 7 million people, exploding over the entire Roman Empire under persecution that you and I could have never experienced, there is one profound logical conclusion: something happened in that tomb. The reason for us to say we can look at these stories and actually believe that the resurrection is a credible witness. It requires faith, don't hear me wrong. But it is a deeply logical and reasonable response as well. The resurrection is compelling. And also, Christianity has just transformed the world in unprecedented ways. I'm already behind on time, so I can't go into some of the details on this. But let me just tell you this. If you're thankful for hospitals, you can thank Christianity. If you're thankful for schools and education, you can thank Christianity. If you're thankful for compassionate care organizations that love the poor, you can thank Christianity. If you believe in abolition movements, then you can thank Christianity. If you actually believe in social justice for the poor, you can actually thank Christianity. If you believe in equal rights for women, you can thank Christianity. The substance of the world was changed by a person named Jesus. The education system throughout the world was formed by Christians. The hospitals throughout the world. Do you know even to this day, the Catholic Church, and the Protestant Church together are the single largest network of hospitals in the world? The compassionate movement of Christianity. I'm not saying Christianity hasn't had flaws over the last 2,000 years. Of course it has. But all of those flaws are when we have abandoned the person of Jesus. They're not inherent to who he is. They're inherent to when Christians want to get powerful and stop believing the gospel. I love this quote. This is by an agnostic philosopher, Jaroslav Pelikan. He says this: regardless of what anyone may think personally, think or believe about him, Jesus of Nazareth has been the most dominant figure in the history of Western culture for almost 20 centuries. If it were possible with some sort of super magnet to pull up out of history every scrap of metal bearing at least a trace of his name, how much would be left? How much would be left? There is a credible witness to Christianity. People say, you can't trust the Bible. No, that's not true. You can't trust the resurrection. Actually, that's not true either. And you can't trust the Christian witness. Excuse me. Actually, we can. I'm not moving past our flaws. I'm not moving past the horrible decisions we've made throughout ages in history. God will hold us accountable and should hold us accountable. But when you look at the Christian witness that's looked like Jesus, it's changed the entire world. Third, you're not frustrated because Christianity has failed you. You're frustrated because your heart longs for a form of Christianity that many of us are simply unwilling to live. Friends, I get it. And listen, everywhere I go, people are jaded. I go speak at missions organizations, people that are literally laying down their life for the sake of the gospel in foreign countries. They're jaded. I go to Bible colleges, they're jaded. I speak at churches, they're jaded. I hang out with you, you're jaded. And we wonder why our hardness of heart. It's not because we've dove in deep into Christianity and found it lacking. It's because so many of us have wanted to compromise its substance so we don't have to do what it costs. And so we pick apart Christianity, all the parts we like of it, and we leave all the parts of it we don't like of it, and we wonder why it doesn't fill us with life. Friends, there's nothing I can do. The fact that Jesus called us to self-denial. He called us to a cross. He called us to an enemy love. He called us to a bowl and a towel. He called us to a way of life that if you would dive in deep with me, it would change everything about you. I'm telling you, I want to challenge you. Come dive into the deep end with me. There's days I feel like I'm drowning, but I'm telling you, Jesus is a good Savior. There's something that can happen in your life if you would just be willing to go all in for the sake of what Jesus is really asking you to do. See, we can't get our hearts hard because we're living in a half version of Christianity. It's time for us to embrace all that He has to offer us. I love this quote by G.K. Chesterton, G.K., that says this: Christianity has not been tried and found wanting. It has been found difficult and not tried. This is true among us. There's this ancient comedian named Lucian of Samosata. It's one of my favorite quotes in historical record about Christianity. He was actually an ancient comedian, and he would go, and this was a very popular form of entertainment in ancient Rome, and he would go from town to town, and he would basically recite comedies that he wrote. And I want you to hear, he wrote a comedy where he talked about the evils of Christianity, and this is just a section of his comedy. Listen to what he says. These deluded creatures you see have persuaded themselves that they are immortal and will live forever, which explains their contempt of death and willing self-sacrifice that is so common among them. It was impressed on them by their lawgiver that at the moment they are converted, they deny the gods of Greece, they worship a crucified sage, and they live after his laws, and they are now brothers. They take his instructions completely on faith, with the result that they despise all worldly goods and they hold them in common ownership. So any adroit and scrupulous fellow who knows the world had only get among these simple souls, and his fortune is quickly made, for he can play with them. Friends, 140 years after Jesus, when Rome wanted to mock what Christians were like, they said this: they were radically in love with God. They were radically in love with each other. They had contempt for death. They were self-sacrificial. They were generous, and they were believers. I'll tell you what, I'll take being mocked like that. You and I need to reclaim this kind of Christianity. We need to dive back deep into the substance of Jesus himself. I'm telling you, there is more hope than you could have ever thought. Come with me into the fullness of Jesus. If you have experienced pharisaical, legalistic, cheap evangelicalism, I'm sorry. There is so much more to Jesus than that. Fourth, our faith has profound answers to the ache of all humanity and to the wasteland being created by secularism. This is the beauty of following Jesus. So we actually have significant answers for a broken and unbelieving world. That is my phone ringing. 4 questions every human asks. This is where did I come from? What went wrong? How do we fix it? What is my purpose? See, the problem with secularism has no ability to tell you where you came from. What I find interesting about secularism is they want to deny that anything is wrong. They have no solution for fixing it. They're only making the mess bigger. And ultimately, people are anxious, depressed, full of shame, and don't want to keep living because secularism says you have no meaning. See, so why do we want to marry our beliefs with this? See, the tension that we feel as Christ followers is this. As secularism says you have to go in that direction, there is a pressure now put on us. We talked about this last week. In light of realizing you're living as an exile, you have one of 3 options. You can syncretize your faith, which means you can blend it with culture. But what you do when you do that is you actually lose the substance of your soul and you deny any authenticity and power. And basically you just believe in secularism with a nice guy named Jesus in the middle of it. Or you become a separatist, and this is where the church has gone deeply wrong. And you blame other people and you condemn other people and you buy shelters and you get shotguns and you just wait it out for the rapture, right? And we abandon the ways of Jesus. Or you say yes to being an exile. Somebody who lives among a group of people but longs for a kingdom that's coming. That can stay faithful to your kingdom identity while living faithfully among a kingdom that is not yours. This is what is being asked of us now. And as followers of Jesus, we have profound answers. Where did I come from? You are Imago Dei. You are image of God. No matter your race, your creed, your orientation, your lifestyle, no matter whether I agree with you or disagree, whether you like Jesus or you don't like Jesus, I can tell you with this confidence, you are made in the image of God. And it matters. And there is a love for you that is radical simply because that's true. Imago Dei, we as followers of Jesus have the only true answer for where we came from. What went wrong? There was this brokenness, this sickness, this disease that came crashing into the world, this separated union between God and man. Something that defines everything we see from hunger to war to hatred to bigotry, you name it. The world was meant to be in partnership and union with God, and at some point that broke. How do we fix it? See, the hard news, guys, is you can't fix it. You can't fix it. But Jesus can. And there is a hope and a confidence we carry because this is not all up to us. There is a God who can rescue the day. And so now what is my purpose? My purpose is to lay down my life for my neighbor and to partner with God for the renewal of my city and to believe that there is a new creation that can change everything. See, Jesus is able to minister and communicate value to me in the way nothing else can. And actually, Jesus can help me go from doubt to life, from shame to acceptance, from self to others, from consumers to mission, and from performing to abiding. And guess what, friends? You don't have to live under the weight of the secular story anymore that is constantly chasing a false idea of success. That isn't having to keep up with the Joneses and making sure your Instagram is moving as fastly along as others are. You actually get to experience the deep and profound joy that only comes from one place. I am God's beloved. Can I tell you what I want to be true with my life? I want to be a spectacle to secularism. Here's what I want to be. I want to be that wild, foolish, Bible-believing Christian that they fear me to be. And I want to unashamedly walk into the world and go, you are damaging people, but I have a hope that you do not. And I am going to anchor and leverage my life for the sake of the kingdom of God and this person named Jesus. And I am unashamed to belong to the gospel. I am unashamed to belong to the Christian story. I am unashamed to belong to the historic witness of Christians. And I am unashamed to submit my life to the New Testament. That's good. Because I have a hope in Jesus that I will not syncretize with the world around me. I have a hope in Jesus that's the answer to the world around me. That's what you and I carry. There are deep, deep reasons for the hope that we have in Jesus. Matt, will you come up wherever you are? You're somewhere. There you are. This is my friend Matt Stover, and he's going to share some of his story. Well, part of why I wanted him to share some of his story with you is because Matt, several years ago, was studying at Biola University, studying linguistics and missions to actually go onto the mission field to do Bible translation, wanting to give his life for the sake of the gospel. And it was here he experienced profound and crippling doubt that got him to the point of being uncertain of whether he actually believed in Jesus or not. And part of his story is his journey from that place. And it mattered to me that you guys saw not just heartbeat, but a human that walked through these very issues and is here among us as a faithful Christ follower. And so I just wanted him to share some of his story. So could you welcome with me, Matt?
So, 9 years ago, I would have thought it would be pretty unlikely that I'd be standing here sharing from the standpoint of someone who is still a Christian. And as Phil said, I came to a point of crippling doubt when I was studying linguistics and biblical languages. I was taking seminary classes, linguistics classes, and I'll give you the really short version, but basically, I went into grad school with what I thought was an airtight system of beliefs. And as I kind of put the Bible under the microscope in my seminary classes and was started confronting for the first time some objections to faith that I hadn't really wrestled with before, my doubts began to grow and some holes began to be punctured in my airtight system of beliefs. And I really faced the prospect for the first time in my life, what if what I believe actually isn't true? And it was terrifying. I had just gotten married. I thought, what would this do to my wife if I walk away from faith? It removes the meaning for my life. And really, my faith was the foundation for all my hope. And so I entered this period of, it was a few months of pretty dark depression. I had anxiety. I popped out gray hairs all over the place as I knew that I had to wrestle with these things and get answers. And I was, because I knew how much it meant to me and how much I wanted to believe in Christianity, I was really afraid of self-deception. I knew the power of confirmation bias, and so I said, I need to kind of suspend belief and examine the best arguments from both sides, for and against Christianity, if I'm ever going to have a confident faith again. And as I did that and tried to kind of plug those holes in my worldview, I found that there were better arguments against my faith than I thought there were. And so I came to this place of just, I felt that I was at an intellectual impasse. There were strong reasons to believe in Jesus. There were real challenges. And I was emotionally exhausted from the process of wrestling with all this. And I was, reading all kinds of books. I was reading Dawkins and Hitchens and all the atheists, and I was reading, apologetics books and talking to professors at Biola, Old Testament guy, New Testament guy, apologetics guy, trying to get answers. I was just emotionally beat up from feeling like I didn't have conclusive answers. And so I said, I'm just going to throw in the towel. I'm never going to be able to have a confident faith again because I can't plug these holes. And there were a couple turning points that maybe some of you would find helpful. One, I had a professor, he actually wasn't even my professor, but he was a well-known apologetics guy, went to our church and let me go to his office hours and just ping him with questions. And as I was talking to him about this and saying, I think I'm done, he helped me to realize it actually didn't make sense to just reject Christianity whole package because I had some questions that I had unresolved answers to, and because my version of Christianity wasn't working for me anymore. That what I needed to focus on was Jesus. If Jesus rose from the dead, that absolutely changes everything. And if that's true, then I can build out from there. And some of those questions, not that they're not important, but Jesus was central. And as I reframed with kind of that approach, I decided, based on a lot of the evidence that Phil shared earlier, that actually, the evidence for the resurrection is incredibly compelling. So that was the linchpin for me, was the evidence for the resurrection, and then and just the compelling person of Jesus as I encountered him in Scripture. And the second really important kind of what I'll call piece of evidence for me was just the testimony of God's work in the lives of other people. And that was from something as simple as believers that I knew, and the witness of the Spirit in their own lives, just the joy and the peace that they had in Jesus through their walk with him, their experience of him. And then the kind of more impressive examples of God's miraculous work in the lives of some people at my church. I went to a charismatic church where God did some pretty amazing, miraculous things that I couldn't deny. And the testimony of trustworthy people in missionary biographies and things that God's doing today in the Middle East, Jesus appearing to people in dreams and visions. There's Book of Acts type stuff that's still happening in our world today, and it's actually undeniable. And when I confronted those things, I said, wow, I don't know how all these questions of doctrinal issues and my theory of the Scriptures work out, but I can believe in Jesus, and I'm going to start there. And then the second thing that really was helpful in me kind of working toward a place of confidence and being able to follow Jesus even in the midst of doubt was another professor who helped me to see that faith and doubt, which I had always saw as mutually exclusive, were not. That if you think of doubt as kind of a vertical axis of we'll call it psychological confidence, with absolute certainty up here and absolute rejection or absolute doubt down here. that can actually change for us from one day to another. And I would have good days and bad days. And it was certainly influenced by intellectual evidence. It was influenced by all kinds of subjective things. When my faith was at its lowest ebb, I should say when my confidence was at its lowest ebb, I still had to put my faith in something, and we all do. Faith is what we base our lives on. It's a commitment that we make. It's choices we make, and no one can escape from that. And so whether my confidence was really high or really low, I had to make a choice. Was I going to put my faith in Jesus? Did I want to commit my life to following Jesus, or was I going to reject him and say, sorry, your demands are too high, you haven't given me enough evidence, so I'm just going to be an agnostic? And I decided that he was someone that I was willing to bet my life on, that I was going to take him up on his promises, that if you seek me, you'll find me. If you knock, the door will be opened. He didn't give me a timeline on that. I just said, if it takes my whole life, that's what I'm going to do because he's worth it. And over the years, as I continued to put one foot in front of the other and pray and seek him, and sometimes it felt like my prayers were hitting the ceiling, and the only thing I could pray was, God, I believe, help my unbelief. But slowly but surely, he did begin to restore my faith and my sense of his presence in my life. And I did experience more and more of the life abundant that he promises. And I would just encourage you, if you find yourself in a similar place to where I was, encourage you with 3 things. 1, share it with somebody. Don't just keep it to yourself. Share it with people that you love, that you trust. All the better if it's someone who's kind of wrestled with similar things. And multiple people even. Get prayer. The second thing is seek answers. There are really good, compelling reasons to believe in Jesus, as Phil shared, and I'm happy to share some resources that were helpful to me. And I'm happy to talk to anybody. The third is pray. Pray raw, honest prayers. If all you can do is say, God, I don't get it, I don't believe right now, but help my unbelief, do that.
One thing I would love to have you just do for us, Matt, is just pray over us. And so, can I ask, will you stand? And just going to ask Matt to pray, and then I'm going to share one last thing, and then we're going to end our service in a song of worship. But I just think it's important that we just invite God even into this moment. So,
Heavenly Father, God, thank you for the work that you've done in my life to bring me to this point, Lord. Thank you for your continued testimony in the lives of people in this room. Lord, I pray for people who are in a place similar to where I was. I pray for people who have loved ones in that place. God, that you would work, that, Lord, that you would show people that there are reasons to believe in Jesus Christ, and that, Lord, those people who feel distant from you right now, God, I pray that you would just work in their hearts, reassure them that you are here, and do that through your Holy Spirit and through your community here. I pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
I want to just close on this. And friends, listen, we could take weeks and weeks and weeks and talk more and more and more. I know that we're just scratching the surface of some significant conversations, but I want to remind you of something. That it makes sense that if Jesus is who he says that he is, that you'll find him where he said you'll find him, right? And there is one profound place that Jesus said you would find him. And it's among his people. Jesus says, how will the world know that I am who I say that I am? By the way you love one another. By the way you treat one another. by this thing that we do called family, church. See, when we make this cheap, we make it easy for the world to reject Jesus. And I want to say this to anyone who's a believer who's walking through considerable doubt, and anyone who's an unbeliever walking through uncertainty. Come dive into family, because you'll find him. And if he is real, then he'll be where he told you he is. So come look for him here. Come look for him among family. Come look for him among friends. And I want you to know this. No matter where you land today, no matter where you agree or disagree with me, you are loved, you are valuable, you are safe, and you are wanted by both Jesus and by us.